the quiet suburbs of Wichita, Kansas, life seemed ordinary. Children rode their bikes down tree-lined streets. Neighbors waved from porches. The hum of daily routines went on without a hint of disturbance. And in the midst of it all, a man walked among them. He smiled at the mailman, nodded politely to the cashier at the grocery store, and attended church every Sunday, volunteering in ways that made him look like the perfect community member. He was polite. He was normal. He was the kind of man everyone trusted. Maybe you knew him. Maybe he was your friend's dad, your coworker, your neighbor who always offered to help carry groceries. He was harmless, or so it seemed. But behind that calm exterior, behind that friendly smile and that carefully maintained normal life, lurked a darkness so profound, so unimaginable, that it would one day shock not just Wichita, but the entire nation. This man lived a double life that no one could have guessed. By day, a devoted family man and church leader. By night, a calculating predator who would go on to take 10 innocent lives, leaving families shattered, hearts broken, and a community living in fear for decades. This was Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. Bind. Torture. Kill. For more than 30 years, he terrorized Wichita with crimes so methodical, so sinister, that no one saw it coming. And all the while, no one suspected a thing. Not a neighbor, not a friend, not even his own family. The question is, how could someone so ordinary, so seemingly trustworthy, harbor such unimaginable evil? And that is exactly what we're about to uncover. Dennis Rader was born in 1945 in a small Midwestern town, growing up in a family that appeared, on the surface, to be normal and unremarkable. His childhood was outwardly ordinary: school, family dinners, neighborhood play. But beneath the surface, there were subtle signs of a darker nature beginning to emerge. From a young age, Rader displayed a fascination with control and power. He was drawn to rules, structure, and, disturbingly, the suffering of others. There are reports from his childhood of him tormenting animals, experimenting with cruelty in ways that were more than childish curiosity. As he grew into adolescence, his obsession with secrecy and authority intensified. He was meticulous, careful, and methodical, traits that, in another context, might have been seen as discipline, but here foreshadowed a chilling pattern. He was quietly learning how to manipulate, how to observe, and how to plan without leaving a trace. His fascination with control wasn't just about dominance over objects or situations, it was about dominance over people, over life itself. By the early 1970s, these dark impulses had fully taken shape. Rader didn't act randomly, he studied his future victims, learning their routines, observing their vulnerabilities, and identifying the perfect moments to strike. His crimes were not impulsive acts of rage, they were meticulously orchestrated, each one a calculated assertion of control. This careful planning became his signature, earning him the chilling moniker BTK, bind, torture, kill. Imagine it, someone you trust, someone who seems harmless, even admirable, moving through your community with a smile on his face, while all the while, in the shadows, he is calculating, observing, and preparing. A predator hiding in plain sight. This duality, the seamless mask of normalcy overlaying the darkest human impulses, is what made Dennis Rader so terrifying. Every action, every plan, every crime he would later commit was rooted in this early obsession with power, secrecy, and control. And for years, no one had any idea what was brewing behind the seemingly ordinary exterior of the men they thought they knew. The first BTK murders struck in 1974, shattering the quiet rhythm of Wichita, Kansas. Joseph Otero, a devoted father and husband, along with his family, became Rader's initial victims, the beginning of a spree that would stretch across decades, leaving an indelible scar on the community. But what made these murders truly horrifying wasn't just the act itself, it was the precision, the planning, and the cold, calculated intention behind every move. Rader didn't kill randomly or impulsively. Each crime was meticulously orchestrated. He studied his victims for weeks, sometimes months, learning their routines, their habits, the way they moved through their homes. Then, when the moment was perfect, he struck. His murders were not just acts of violence, they were acts of control, domination, and obsession. In the aftermath, he staged the scenes with careful attention, leaving evidence that would later become part of his twisted signature. But Rader's true terror extended beyond the physical. He craved psychological control, too. He taunted law enforcement and the public with letters and cryptic messages, each one designed to elicit fear, frustration, and fascination. Some were sent to newspapers, some to police stations. In these letters, he described his crimes in grotesque, almost theatrical detail, a macabre form of performance art that spoke to his arrogance, his obsession, and his unquenchable need to assert dominance over both life and death. Every letter, every carefully timed phone call, every signature ritual reinforced his power. BTK wasn't just about killing, it was about making the community, the victims' families, and the authorities feel helpless. Psychologists later explained that this behavior wasn't merely murder, it was the projection of a personality that craved total control over human life. It was the work of someone utterly disconnected from empathy, morality, or remorse. Someone who derived a disturbing sense of satisfaction from manipulation, terror, and the knowledge that he could evade capture. To the residents of Wichita, life continued around them, unaware of the predator in their midst. But for those who encountered him, whether directly or indirectly, the shadow of BTK loomed large. It wasn't just the fear of death, it was the fear that someone so ordinary, so seemingly trustworthy, could harbor such darkness. And that fear would linger for decades, long after each individual attack, haunting the hearts and minds of the community. By day, Dennis Rader appeared to live a life that most people would envy. He was the perfect neighbor, the friendly face everyone trusted. He coached Little League, helping children learn teamwork and discipline. He was active in his church, volunteering his time and taking on leadership roles, even serving as president of his church council. Friends and colleagues saw a devoted husband, a loving father, a man committed to his family and community. He married, raised 2 children, and maintained an image of stability and normalcy so convincing that it hid the unspeakable horrors lurking behind closed doors. But when night fell, a different reality emerged. Dennis Rader became BTK, a predator operating with precision, cruelty, and detachment. While the community slept peacefully, he enacted his darkest desires, meticulously planning and executing crimes that would shock the nation when revealed decades later. This chilling contrast, the smiling, ordinary man by day and the methodical killer by night, is what made him so elusive. No one could have imagined that someone so ordinary could commit acts so horrific. Psychologists describe this as the ultimate example of compartmentalization, the ability to completely separate one's public self from the private self, no matter how sinister that private self may be. Rader had perfected this duality. He could pray in church, play with his children, attend community events, and then return home to orchestrate unimaginable violence. The mask he wore was flawless, convincing, and terrifyingly effective. It forces us to ask ourselves a question that's both simple and terrifying: how well do we really know the people around us? The truth is, sometimes evil doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it doesn't scream or rage. Sometimes it sits quietly in your neighbor's living room, smiles politely at a Sunday sermon, and folds neatly into the fabric of everyday life. It is the silence, the ordinariness, and the trust that makes it so frightening. And this duality is exactly what allowed BTK to evade capture for decades. By blending into the mundane, he hid in plain sight, a predator camouflaged in the safest of places, living among the very people who feared him the least. It is a haunting reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that evil can sometimes wear the most ordinary faces. For decades, the BTK killer had eluded law enforcement, moving with the patience and precision of a predator who knew how to hide in plain sight. He taunted police with letters, sending cryptic messages and detailed accounts of his murders. Each communication was calculated to frustrate, confuse, and instill fear. He seemed untouchable, a ghost moving through the city, leaving terror in his wake but never leaving enough evidence to be caught. Then, after a silence of more than a decade, Rader re-emerged in 2004. What many would later call his fatal mistake began with a renewed desire for attention, a compulsion to be recognized for his crimes, to assert once again the control that had defined him for decades. This time, however, his arrogance would be his undoing. He sent a floppy disk to the police, believing it to be untraceable. But in his overconfidence, he overlooked one crucial detail: the metadata embedded in the file. Digital breadcrumbs led directly to his church, to his very own computer. Law enforcement quickly connected the dots. Suddenly, the myth of an invisible, untouchable killer collapsed under the weight of modern technology and the carelessness of hubris. In February 2005, the unthinkable happened. Dennis Rader, the man who had terrorized Wichita for decades, the man who had smiled in church, coached Little League, and lived undetected among neighbors, was finally arrested. The revelations that followed were chilling. Rader confessed to all 10 of his murders, detailing his crimes with the same meticulous precision that had allowed him to evade capture for so long. Families were forced to confront the horrifying truth: the man who had lived next door, who had seemed so ordinary, was responsible for unimaginable acts of violence. The depth of the horror he had inflicted on the community became clear, and the realization settled like a shadow over Wichita: evil had lived among them for decades, hidden behind the most ordinary of masks. The capture of Dennis Rader was not just a victory for law enforcement, it was a shocking reminder of how cunning, patience, and obsession can allow a predator to evade justice, and how even the most ordinary faces can conceal extraordinary darkness. What drives someone like Dennis Rader, a man capable of living an ordinary life while committing unspeakable acts in secret? Psychologists and criminal profilers have spent years analyzing his behavior, and the conclusions are chilling. Rader displayed traits of extreme narcissism, an inflated sense of self, a belief that he was smarter than everyone around him, untouchable, and above the law. He craved recognition, but not in the conventional sense. He wanted the world to fear him, to acknowledge his power without ever truly knowing him. At the same time, he exhibited sadism, deriving satisfaction from the suffering of others, not only in the act of killing but in the psychological manipulation that preceded it. His letters to the police, filled with grotesque detail, were designed to torment both law enforcement and the families of his victims. Every word, every signature move, reinforced his dominance. Then there was the meticulous planning, the hallmark of a truly calculated predator. Rader studied his victims, observed their routines, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. This patience, combined with his ability to compartmentalize his life, allowed him to function as a loving father, an upstanding church member, and a community leader, all while orchestrating terror in secret. His normal life became his ultimate tool, the mask that allowed him to commit atrocities without suspicion. It gave him a sense of power that went far beyond physical control. He was in command of his image, his perception, and ultimately, the lives of those around him. For decades, he moved undetected, proving that evil doesn't always announce itself with screams or chaos. Sometimes, it smiles politely, shakes your hand, and sits quietly in your neighborhood. Understanding the psychology of BTK isn't merely an academic exercise, it's a lesson in vigilance, empathy, and human complexity. It reminds us that darkness can exist alongside the ordinary, that the mind can harbor inconceivable desires while maintaining a facade of normalcy. It challenges us to question the world around us, to look closer, and to acknowledge that appearances can be deceiving. Ultimately, studying Rader's mind reveals a terrifying truth about human nature: evil can be normalized, compartmentalized, and hidden behind the most ordinary of smiles. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, about deception, and about the capacity for darkness that exists not just in others, but potentially in the human psyche itself. The BTK case left a scar on Wichita that would not fade with time. 10 innocent lives were brutally taken. Families were torn apart, haunted not just by the loss of their loved ones, but by the knowledge that the men responsible had lived undetected among them for decades. He had attended the very same church services, smiled at neighbors, and participated in community events, all while harboring unspeakable darkness within him. Imagine the shock, the disbelief, and the lingering fear that swept through the city when Dennis Rader was finally unmasked. The horror was not only in the murders themselves but in the realization that the person who had inflicted such pain could have been someone you trusted, someone who blended seamlessly into your daily life, someone who looked like you, or your neighbor, or your friend's dad. This duality, the ordinary and the monstrous coexisting within a single person, is what made the BTK case so haunting, and why it continues to captivate and terrify true crime enthusiasts even decades later. And it forces a chilling question upon all of us: how well do we really know the people in our lives? Could someone hiding behind a mask of normalcy, someone who seems kind, responsible, and trustworthy, be capable of acts that defy comprehension? It's a thought that unsettles the mind, yet one we must confront if we are to truly understand the complexities of human behavior. Now, I want to hear from you. Take a moment to think about your own world, your own neighbors, friends, or colleagues. Could someone you pass every day, someone who smiles politely or waves from across the street, be hiding a darkness you would never suspect? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one of them. Your perspective might be different, but it could open a window into understanding the human capacity for deception and hidden evil. As we reflect on this case, it is a reminder that vigilance, awareness, and empathy are not just abstract concepts, they are tools to navigate a world where darkness can wear the most ordinary of faces. The BTK case is horrifying, yes, but it is also instructive. It teaches us about the dangers of assumption, the complexity of human psychology, and the importance of paying attention to the small details that might reveal a much larger truth. If this breakdown of Dennis Rader and the BTK case opened your eyes to the chilling duality of human nature, take a moment to reflect on what you've just learned. A man who smiled at neighbors, attended church, and played the perfect role in his community was capable of committing unimaginable acts in secret. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it hides quietly in plain sight, masked by a veneer of normalcy, waiting patiently for its moment. So, here's what I want you to do: like this video if it made you rethink what normal can sometimes conceal. Subscribe if you want to explore more stories that uncover the hidden truths of human behavior, crime, and psychology. And don't forget to share this video with someone who loves true crime, someone who appreciates the dark, complex, and often shocking realities of human nature. Remember, the world isn't always what it seems. The most ordinary faces can hide the darkest secrets. The people you see every day, friends, neighbors, colleagues, could be concealing more than you realize. Cases like BTK serve as a haunting reminder of that unsettling truth. Stay aware. Stay curious. And above all, never underestimate the quiet, hidden layers that exist behind ordinary lives. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.